Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel, and I'm 16 years old. Recently, I tried to find my real parents, but I ended up almost going to jail. Uh, I was saved by a miracle, and I'd like to tell you about it. I'll start from the very beginning. A couple of years ago, I found out that I was adopted. It was by accident, actually. My father had health problems, and he needed a transplant. Of course, I volunteered to help, but I was turned down. Not because I was too young, but because I was not a relative of my father's. It was then that my parents told me that I was adopted. It was a huge blow to me, but we had no time to fight about it. My father needed help, and all of our attention was directed at solving the problem. When my dad recovered and the dust settled, I tried many times to start a conversation about my adoption, but my parents kept saying that it didn't matter, and that they loved me, and that my past meant nothing. Then I got angry about the fact that they had kept this information from me, and our relationship got worse because of our constant bickering. Plus, Dad's illness took all the money and energy that our family had, and it was a very difficult time for us. Life was hard, and my only happiness was my best friend Nate. He was the only person who was honest with me, and I could always count on his help. Oh, we had a lot of adventures together. Nate always knew how to have fun, and he was kind of a thrill seeker. He also had problems with his parents, so we liked to go out and hang out together, and Nate always came up with some cool ideas. For example, once he showed me how we could get into the stadium and watch a baseball game for free. Of course, then we had to run away from the guards, but it was fun. We always left those guys behind and just laughed at them. But once our prank ended badly. We always passed this one billboard on our way home from school. There was a picture of a man on it, with a big smile, inviting us to see the dentist. This ad was very annoying, and we saw it every day. One day, Nate thought it would be a good idea to adjust the picture, so we took cans of spray paint and began to add small details on the picture. The job was done, and it turned out pretty nice. But it seems that someone didn't like our work and called the police while we were painting. And this time, we didn't manage to escape. Fortunately, we got off with just a fine, and our parents took us away. Nate's parents were very angry, and they started fighting right there in the police station. It wasn't until that moment that I really understood how bad the relationship was. Nate didn't like his parents at all because he was a complete disappointment to them. The conversation with my parents was very unpleasant, too. They were really angry with me, and they said that this was not how I was raised. I was hurt by their words, and I got angry. I had so much anger built up inside of me, and I started yelling at them that they weren't my real parents and that they never cared about me. But what annoyed me most was the fact that they were hiding the truth about me, so I just exploded. I was swearing and screaming. It really upset them, and they finally decided to just tell me everything. My real parents were very young when my mom got pregnant with me, and they understood that then they could not have a child because they both had ambitions and plans for the future. They had started to build a business and couldn't afford to be distracted by a child, so they were looking for a way out of their situation, and their salvation was my adoptive parents. They couldn't have children of their own, so they were happy to adopt a child, and right after I was born, they took me into their home. I didn't understand their logic. Why did they adopt a child to grow up in this poverty? And why did they hide it from me? I couldn't calm myself down, and I just went to my room and tried to figure it out. But then I had another thought. I wondered what kind of people you have to be to give up your own child. What were my biological parents thinking? I really wanted to find them and look them in the eyes. I shared my experience with Nate. He said that it was a great idea, and he gave me some advice. There are many services on the internet that help you find out information about your birth parents. He used one in hopes of finding out that his parents weren't his relatives. Yes, his relationship problems with his mom and dad were much more complicated than mine. Anyway, I just needed a little information, and I asked my parents about it. Soon, I had the names and surnames of my biological mom and dad, and the city where they lived. Then, I found them on Facebook, looked at their pictures, and saw the house they lived in. Oh, it looked like they were very successful, because the house was huge. In one of their Facebook photos, there was a small sign with their address. I now had all the information I needed. I just had to ask my parents for money for a bus ticket. But my mom and dad were really alarmed by my request. They thought I was going to do something bad, and they forbade me from going there. But I'd already done some great work, and I wasn't going to stop there. So we had a fight, and then I just slammed the door and left. I couldn't get out of town without help, so I turned to Nate. As I expected, he supported me and suggested a plan. He could take his parents' car, and we could go to my biological mom and dad's house. This would be our new adventure. After a little argument with Nate's parents, he took the car, and a few minutes later, we were on the road. I was excited, and I imagined myself telling my parents to their faces what I thought about them. We arrived in the evening. It was a very expensive and fancy neighborhood. They must have been very rich. I was worried, and even a little afraid to ring the doorbell, but Nate was there, and he was comforting and supportive. I rang the bell, and a minute later, the door opened. A man stood in front of me, looking surprised. They weren't expecting guests. Then I introduced myself and said I came here because I was his son. There was an awkward silence for a moment. Then he invited us inside and called his wife. The house looked incredible inside. I swear to you, there was a massive statue near the stairs. A herd of elephants could live in this house, and it made me angry. All my life, I lived in a small house, and I had no idea that my real parents were so rich. And at the same time, they didn't care about their child, so I told them everything. I shouted at them and swore, but they remained calm. The only thing they said was that, unfortunately, they couldn't help me. I was so desperate, and Nate came to the rescue. He said that my parents should pay me some kind of compensation for moral damage. But then, they just laughed at us and said we had to leave, or that they would call the police. We had no choice. We had to just leave. I was so angry with them. How dare they say that to their own son? No, I wasn't going to leave it just like that. They had to pay for what they did. So Nate and I came up with a plan. We wanted to get revenge on them, and we decided to wait until dark. We were lucky, and a couple of hours later, my biological parents left the house, got in their car, and drove away. We were just going to trash their house a little bit, but then Nate had the idea to try to get inside and take what was rightfully mine. Oh, we had a blast that night. We broke the window, climbed inside, and began to break everything we could find. Bam! Bam! Shards of glass were everywhere. Then I went to the statue and started pushing it. I was almost able to knock it over, but then we heard a siren. It was the police. We dropped everything and ran to the car. Thank God we escaped before we were spotted. No, we didn't have time to steal anything, but we let off some steam and drove home happy. But after a couple of hours, our fun came to an end. My mother called, and she was in tears. The police came to our house and started asking about me. I guess my biological parents realized that it was us and told the police everything. It was over. At that moment, I understood what we had done, and that we couldn't escape from punishment. The only way out was to surrender and brace ourselves for our punishment. Then, we went through a lot of unpleasant things. I was arrested, and I saw my parents' frustration. It was a terrible feeling. They were right when they forbade me to go to my birth parents' house. I should have listened to them. We did thousands of dollars worth of damage, and we could go to jail. But suddenly, I was released and told that the charges were dropped. It turns out that my mom and dad were able to convince my biological parents to not press charges. Instead, they were going to compensate them for the house and other damages. And they agreed. I don't know why. Maybe they felt guilty for giving up their child somewhere deep down, and so they paid off their moral debt this way. I don't know. Now, I'll spend the next few years working to pay off the debt to my parents. But the main thing that I realized is that they are the most valuable people in my life, even if they're not my birth mom and dad. Nate's parents are related to him, but they don't love him half as much as my foster parents love me. I wanted to find my biological parents so badly that I almost lost my real family. They're wonderful people, and I'm sorry I did this to them. I love them very much, and I will try to make amends. That's the end of my story, guys. Thank you for your attention. Was I right to start looking for my biological parents? Could you have overcome your curiosity? Write about it in the comments, and don't forget to share this video with your friends.